In this module's History of Sabermetrics track, we're going to be looking at Earnshaw Cook. We've seen a little of Earnshaw Cook earlier in the course when we looked at winning percentage estimators. One of the winning percentage estimators we evaluated was Cook's that he published in his book Percentage Baseball. Earnshaw Cook was born in Maryland at the turn of the century and graduated from Princeton in 1921, where he played baseball. And his lifelong fascination with baseball never abated as he did his work following his graduation from college as a metallurgist and a mechanical engineer. He worked for the American Brake Shoe Company in New Jersey for many years until he retired in 1945. As part of his work, he actually contributed to the Manhattan Project during the war. When he retired in 1945, he taught engineering part-time at Johns Hopkins. He bought an estate in the countryside of Maryland and sort of lived a gentlemanly life where he consulted with various faculty on interesting ideas he had. And one idea he had was applying his math skills to baseball analytics to better understand the game of baseball. And one of his big theses was that Ty Cobb was a better baseball player than Babe Ruth. And he spent many hours arguing this amongst friends and colleagues. But the fact is, being a trained scientist, he didn't take conventional baseball wisdom to be true. The idea that Babe Ruth, the power hitter, was automatically the more valuable batter than Ty Cobb. So he kept arguing the point, and as he learned more about the game, he decided to apply math skills and probability to the game. An example of Cook's ability to take on conventional wisdom, apply the scientific method, but also a window into his arrogance and hyperbole, is the following quote. Baseball also furnishes a classic example of the utter contempt of its unsophisticated protagonists for the scientific method. His point was that it hadn't been really that well analyzed yet, and being an analyst himself and a scientist himself, he decided to apply more sabermetric and scientific thinking to questions he had about the game. Let's talk some more about Cook's motivation to publish Percentage Baseball. There's some indication that he may have approached different teams in baseball, major league teams, about some of his ideas and some of his analysis, but it seems like he wasn't taken too seriously. There's an indication he talked to the Orioles and got some data from them, but he comes out with this quote in the intro to his book: "The general complacency of professional baseball people, even those of undoubted intelligence, toward mathematical examination of what they regard properly and strictly as their own dish of tea is not too astonishing." So in the end, he thinks they're not applying the scientific method, not applying mathematical principles to their own detriment, but he regards that as par for the course, I think, based on baseball conventional wisdom and how it operates. I wanted to leave you in the introduction to Earnshaw Cook with the quote that really pins it for me from Alan Schwartz. He says, "The first and perhaps most befuddling full-length book to be written of what we now call sabermetrics." And I think this captures it. It really is a significant event in sabermetrics history because it was the first book, and it really is a full-length treatment to a scientific approach to various questions in the game. But it's a befuddling work. It's a strange work. It's certainly not ready for publication in scientific journals. It's filled with a lot of unclear and not concise language describing his probability analysis, his probability theory, and he doesn't spend enough time on his methods describing what he actually did and how he did it. It doesn't play towards the average fan. It doesn't play towards the baseball scholar necessarily, but he applies probabilistic theory and principles to the game of baseball and really sets the tone for future sabermetricians. as such, it really is an important work. Let's continue on talking more about his findings and his main conclusions. His big conclusion that still is relevant today is that the sacrifice bunt is a bad idea, except for when a pitcher is batting and they're a poor hitting pitcher, or the times when you're playing for just one run, late in the game, potentially behind by one run. Those are times when the probabilities, the percentage play, is actually to sacrifice bunt. But otherwise, it's not a good play at all. And you'll see in his run scoring formula, his run estimator formula, where he puts bunts, and his disdain for the sacrifice bunt is clear. His other big conclusion is that you send batters to the plate in the exact order of their batting ability. In other words, your best batter should bat leadoff, and it should go down from there. And the basic principle is that you will increase your plate appearances for your best batters over the course of a long season, and you would lead to more run-scoring opportunities for your teams. Now, different ways he analyzed this. He put big claims on the amount of runs a team would score if they did this. In the same vein, about this idea of trying to get your best batters to bat more often, he said, don't use the platoon system. Just use the 8 best batters you have, and don't worry about the advantages of platoon splits. Now, both these ideas in further analysis have proven not to be true. Batters demonstrate platoon splits, and it's probably advantageous to teams to use those players wisely. And Cook himself, in a later book in 1972, he reanalyzed this idea of the best batter should lead off, and you should have your batters in your lineup order descending from batting ability. He ran a simulation in 1972. Thorne and Palmer also ran a simulation after this. The claim of the runs generated from this lineup that Cook makes turned out to be not true at all. These two claims here of the batting order differences, just not true. Another claim made in percentage baseball is that you start the game with a relief pitcher. And the reason for that is then the first time that the pitcher comes to the plate in the second or third inning, you'll just hit a pinch hitter for them. So you'll get that better batter instead of a weaker pitcher coming to the plate. But you wouldn't lose your starting pitcher because you've already had your relief pitcher pitch for 1 or 2 innings came up before the pitching slot comes up to bat. So use of pinch hitters with this method of starting your game with the relief pitcher and then replacing them first time that relief pitcher comes to the plate was one of Cook's suggestions. And he estimated again how many runs would be scored over the season if you did this. And finally, for this video segment, I wanted to mention that Earnshaw Cook also created his own scoring index. And what he defined this as is the average probability that the batter creates a run for his team. And as we go through it in the next video segment, you'll see its similarities to other measures of batting performance that we know.